Committee. Today is March 17th, 2001. I'd like to call it to order, and I think we should stand and give our pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, as you can see, we have quite a few items on the agenda, and I think, Pat, you want to make one addition?
We need to amend the agenda to include an entry for public participation, and I suggest we enter that after the meeting times discussion.
Yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, as you see, we have a pretty heavy agenda this evening. We have no minutes for the last meeting. I think they're still being prepared, so please forgive us for that. We'll have the meetings minutes ready. We're going to make some changes, and so we will have the minutes ready for future meetings. If I can have the liaison reports. Leah Shelkey from the Recreation Department is supposed to be here. She hasn't shown up yet, so when she does, we'll get back to her. Pat, is there anything to report from the Conservancy?
The Conservancy is very busy, and want to let you know the spring activities they have scheduled. To begin on April 2nd, the Conservancy is going to join with the Kiwanis and Art Kester on the island cleanup effort. April 10th, there's a second Sunday interpretive tour at the refuge, the nature area. The tours change every month to coincide with the changing season, and the program is meant to encourage kids and families to get outdoors, and we'd like to thank our sponsors for supporting the tours, and that's the Kalina Foundation. You may have seen an article in the EO Camera last week in which we described the plan for a prescribed burn on property owned by the Conservancy up in the North End. Thank you. Okay, maybe I'm too close to it? Okay. Is that better? Oh, jeez. Maybe I should do a different mic? I don't know. Okay. Anyway, the prescribed burn that was described is meant for the control of Phragmites, and that is likely to take place in late April. That project, the experiment in Phragmites control, is funded by a grant from Freshwater Futures, which is a citizens action group meant to protect the Great Lakes. On May 1st, from 1 to 4 p.m., there's an Earth Day celebration at Centennial Farm, and that's going to include interpretive nature walks through the adjacent open space property to the west of the Centennial Farm. It includes the third annual Nature and Wildlife Photo Contest for high school and middle school students, and a presentation by Cranbrook's Organization for Bat Conservation. So that should be very interesting. May 8th is another second Sunday tour at the refuge, and it's also the seasonal opening for the nature area. From May 8th through October, the nature area will be open every Sunday from 1 to 4 p.m. Also in May, we're working with the Garden Club on a butterfly learning garden at Centennial Farm, and this project as well is sponsored by the Kalina Foundation. So that's my report.
Thank you, Pat.
Sure.
And as I said before, if Leah comes in, I'll have her give her report of the Recreation Commission. Township Board report, Pam. Is there anything new coming up as far as what's happened as far as the township as relates to the open space program?
Well, at our last township board meeting, during the public comment, we heard a concern by one of the gentlemen there who was making a comment, and he was very concerned that we had not addressed meeting at an hour other than 4 in the afternoon, when basically retirees and those that were free in the afternoon could attend. And I wish I could have reassured him that it is coming, but I think that's something we're going to address in because we're still meeting at 4, and we're going to address that suggestion that we meet at an hour other than 4 in the afternoon, and I think that if we do change the time, we're going to have to make some other adjustments because we're going to lose some of our commission members, committee members, if we meet on a Thursday evening. And also, there was a concern of who's overseeing the property, and I tried to reassure them that we are all assigned areas to look over to see if there's any construction material or debris or invasive species in the area. So I tried to reassure him, but he was coming on pretty strong that we weren't addressing the time change or overseeing the property. So I'm hoping in the near future we can reassure this gentleman that we are covering those issues.
Those two items are, as you can see, Pam, are on the agenda for discussion this evening.
Mm-hmm.
All right, as far as property, anything else, Pam?
That's it.
All right, as far as the property that has been transferred from the township to the open space program officially, I want to make sure that our thinking is correct. Am I correct in stating that there were 3 pieces of property that were transferred? Question: the bird sanctuary, the Marion Park property, which is located, not Marion Park, the Grosseal Manor area, which is located between the Thoroughfare Canal and Meridian, where it crosses Thoroughfare. And the third piece of property was the area to the south end by Albemarle, which used to be called the Township Dump. Those were the only 3 properties that were transferred. Is that correct?
Sounds right.
Okay. All right. So those pieces of property will be officially become part of the open space program. As far as property acquisitions is concerned, Dale has been pretty well tied up with the transfers and the border reviews. I don't think he's done much about the additional property acquisitions. As I pointed out before, we're looking at quite a few pieces of property, but the ones that are on highest in our agendas are some properties that are located along Park Lane. Also, the next item is welcome letter program. Rose is not here tonight. As you know, Rose takes care of the welcome program, whereby she receives a list of names of people who have just moved to the island and sends them a letter welcoming them to the island and telling them about the open space program, along with trail guides and a description of the properties that are under the stewardship of the open space committee. I'm sorry to say that we were also scheduled to have a presentation by a Boy Scout this evening. He called me about 3 weeks ago and said that he wanted to make a presentation. I told him that it was it'd be more than welcome to come. The meeting is at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and that he was welcome to be here. And we would make time for him on the agenda. Fortunately, he hasn't shown up, so either we'll have to call him back and reconfirm, and maybe we'd schedule him for another time. The next item on the review is the review and approve the maintenance budget. Now, if you'll, committee members will look at the sheet of paper that I have in front of me here, and if I, Ron?
The property, just the property purchases, we omitted that.
Well, I omitted that because
Then we have to
Pam,
answer.
Pam has already addressed that. There were 3 items that were bought. There were the,
Okay, that's good.
yeah, the bird sanctuary, the
Roseland Manor?
Grosseal Manor, and the, what we call the township dump, but it's the area bordered by East River and Albemarle.
Yeah, okay.
I think we had about 6 in our pool. We had a total of 7 originally, but it got narrowed down to 3, and we're still trying to find out basically how that happened. Could you, if you could put that on the screen?
Oh, I
again?
thought you were going to get... Gee, that was really privileged here.
Okay,
Is this working out?
I think it is.
Thank you.
Okay. As you do a little bit of background, at the present time, we have an open space maintenance millage. That millage is no longer assessed to the community. It hasn't been assessed, and I think it's been, Pam, about 5 to 6 years now. At that time, we dispensed from assessing any additional millage because we had about over $600,000 in that fund. At the present time, we have $500,000 in that fund, and when you look at the budget that we established last year, it was $84,100. Our actual expenditures for that period of time were $28,720. So this year, Ann, our chief, excuse me. Are you coming back?
Are you going to be doing us or not?
Absolutely.
When?
Next.
Oh, next.
Okay.
I wasn't sure.
Yes.
The agenda is there on the table.
Yeah.
Is there a way to enlarge that quicker? I don't know how.
I tell you what I can do. I think if I have some extra copies here, I can. Do we have extra copies? We can pass them out.
You get one.
And a couple more.
Yeah, I know there's a way to enlarge it, I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or do we?
So, as far as the maintenance item is concerned, what we want to do is we want to approve the budget that Ann put together was about the same as we had 2 years ago. And if if you folks agree, we'll go with the same budget that we had for 2010 and 2011. Put that in as call it a placeholder, and then only spend what we really need to spend. As you know, we're going to have a couple of additional properties to look after. It might be a little bit higher, but I'm looking for some direction from you folks here as far as what we should put in for the budget for next year.
It does look like the dump the junk project is a little more expensive than what we have in the budget. I don't know how close you want to be, but you may want to raise that to a $4,600.
Okay.
And I don't know if you want to adjust the others either closer to what our actual has been, or first talk about what expenses you anticipate this year.
I anticipate, based on the fact we're going to have some additional properties, that the cost for tree removals will be a little bit higher than the $20,000 that we had before.
Do you think it'll be as high as the 65 that she's got plugged in there?
It's hard to say. It's a guess. Maybe if I could make a motion that we go with $84,100, but do not spend any money unless we absolutely have to. What's your thought on that?
I have one question here with the payroll cross charges for the DPS. That was $10,000 budgeted, and we only had $1,300. Now we will have a much higher expense because of probably with the cutting of personnel and in the township. So I don't know whether $10,000, that seems to be quite high.
Right.
If we would go with 5,000, then we don't have the 84,100, because that seems we are running out of then we can increase our tree cutting and remove it.
Okay, would you want to go with $5,000 then?
I personally would see that, because that gives us an increase with the DPS. Who knows, because they are pretty busy with their own things.
All right, if we're going
Maybe
to
they
increase
go to overtime.
if we're going to increase the payroll cross charges to $5,000, then I'm saying we should take the tree cutting up to about 45 or 50.
The only other observation is, how many more acres did we get with the transfers or purchases this winter? I mean, that's that much more property that instead of being maintained under general fund is now going to be maintained under open space maintenance
Right.
funds, right?
Yeah.
So, I would advocate that, maybe you want to be careful not ratcheting it down too far. Because
Agreed.
I don't know who is overseeing that and to what, if the same tree removal attention was being paid to those properties that was being paid to the open space, and if there's going to be more work in those areas.
I would say we go with the with $5,000 for the dumpster program, go with $60,000 for the tree removal, take $5,000 for the payroll cross charges, and put in some monies in there for tree plantings and so forth. Bring it up to about $60,000.
Well, Cliff, the thing that you have about the budget, and that is that these have to be adjusted according to need as you're going through anyway. It's just the budget is just kind of a guideline for you to do it.
It is, but by means of this budget, what we're going to do is put in ourselves some self-control.
Yeah, but the idea is that if there's a need to go higher with the tree removal, we'll have to go that way.
Yes, we will.
For safety reasons.
So what's your recommendation then?
I would say that there's nothing wrong with just going the way it is, knowing that we have to, that we're not going to need $10,000 in the payroll cross charges of DPS.
Okay.
But those charges that would be in the $84,100 could be transferred up into the dumpster program or into the tree removal on top, without affecting the total budget.
All right. So why don't we try to end up with about maybe $60,000, $70,000 in total? Is that a problem?
I don't see a problem with that, except that I'm not sure that you want to make it so that the township doesn't have a feel for what might happen if you have severe tree damage that you have to take, remove a lot of trees.
Do you want to think about this and we'll attack it next month? Because there's some people that are waiting here.
I think you have to have your budget approved before the end of this month.
Yeah. Well, technically you had to have it approved in March, but I didn't know about it until about 3 to 4 weeks ago. So I think the $84,000, quite frankly, I think has already been approved.
Well, I think that I would suggest that that's where we ought to be.
Okay, we'll go with the 84 then, and then we'll spend it. Yes, Pam.
The $3,000 for ads printing and consulting services, that's a large amount, but isn't that to cover, we're hoping one of these days to get a consultant to come down and assess what's going on in the open space to see if...
Yes, if
because we did this many...
that's qualified.
Okay. So the money's there if needed.
It's there if we need it, but we're not going to spend it if we don't spend it properly. Okay. Motion for Art to leave it as it is at $84,000, but not to spend it, but only to spend the money as it's absolutely required.
That's the motion that I made.
Okay. All those in favor?
I second.
Okay, opposed? Okay, I'm going to skip around a little bit because I know that we have an issue concerning a trail request, and I'd like to talk about the Marion Park issue first. We've been talking about this for quite some time. We have a resident with us this evening who has done a lot of work on this particular program. Janet, would you like to come up and just say a couple of words about your efforts and about where we stand on this proposal? I think you have to. Is there a mic that she has to push? Wait till we get you on the. Here, let me.
One of these. Mike.
This one. There, now you're. Can you speak?
Yes. Okay. Janet Papp, 8476 Paulina Avenue. Not where to start. I'm not sure where to start with this. I didn't know that I was going to be speaking. My general understanding was that you were going to get the consensus of just the Open Space Committee at this meeting.
Yes, that is correct. We have a, in your packet here, if you turn to the request for the Marion Park open space, what we've done here is we have written a kind of like a summary of the of where we stand on the open space program with regard to a trail for the Marion Park area. I'm not going to read it all. You can pretty well read it for yourself. We have solicited responses from the people that live on Paulina, I believe as Cardinal and Boyd. And the responses we got from those three areas are summarized below. 31 of 38 residents have responded. 19 favored the trail, 11 were opposed, 1 was neutral. And when you ask the people who were adjacent to the trail, on those 3 streets, 11 residents responded to the letter, 11 out of the 12, and it was split with 5 favoring the trail, 5 opposed, and 1 was neutral. Now, I know there's a difference of views as far as trails on this particular trails in general. We also contacted the police department, and the police department have no objections for a trail being put into this area. We our general approach is to give I'd like to open it up for comments from the committee as far as the results of Janet's work in terms of attaining the responses from the residents. And I think our approach should be, and in fact, our approach should be to give our opinions, our comments, and then forward this document to the Township Board for their ultimate approval.
I did want to just say, as I walked around the neighborhood, and a lot of mine were face-to-face with the owners of the property. I was very careful to ask if they were the owner of the property, and not, because we have some renters, and I don't know everybody. So that's how I attained the signatures, and also got some surprising comments from one lady that property does back to the open space on Voight, and she thanked me for doing what I was doing, which was the first, made me feel great, after all the hard work. And also, I got a response from a gentleman on the phone that said that he was willing to volunteer his time as for whatever. He said he can operate a wood chipper, he has a chainsaw, whatever. So there is some great interest in putting a trail in there. Seems like either people are very for it or very opposed to it, for various reasons that range from liability, which we all have liability in our homes. Anytime you walk outside, you have liability of some sort that you walk into. And the question was that I'm sure the township, we have liability insurance, correct, that covers the township through our attorneys or whatever if there was a liability issue?
Yeah, there are liability issues, and Pat, I think you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the state of Michigan put some limitations on liabilities of people walking on public lands. Is that basically correct?
There's a couple issues that pertain. One is that the Michigan courts have been very averse to find that somebody who's injured from what's considered an obvious hazard, like tripping over a root, that kind of thing, they typically will say, the courts will say, tough luck in legal terms. The other thing is that governmental immunity applies. Michigan has very robust governmental immunity protections. But I have not expressly asked the question of the township attorneys about liability insurance. My feeling would be that if we make a recommendation to adopt a trail, that the township board will be the ones to approve that, approve or deny that recommendation, and that they're informed about the liability issues and that they'll factor that into their decision. Yeah. But, we can acknowledge that it's an understandable concern because as a lawyer, I know people feel that you can get a lawyer, to sue
anybody can sue anybody for anything. We all know that. So.
But I believe there are protections in place to protect the township. But again, I would defer to the township board and the township administration when the final decisions.
There is liability issues. There always is liability issues. When people brought that up, and I said, well, yes, we as homeowners have liability issues if somebody steps on our property, so that's why we have a homeowner's insurance. But basically, I was wanting, it has to be approved by all of the members of the Open Space Committee before it goes to?
What we do is we will give our comments. These comments, either pro or con, are not necessarily binding.
Of course.
But the township, each of us are going to give our comments after we look at all the facts. But they're certainly not binding. I can tell you that whatever the decision is, this is going to go before the township board for their final review and approval.
And on just general looking it over, do any of you have any questions that I can
I have
answer?
just one question. I looked at this in the original in the original request, and isn't this requested for a cut through the open space for one child?
No, that's not me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's the other one.
Forget it.
Okay.
Because my concern is that these places that are used for a passage through in Michigan, going through a woods from November, December, January, February, and March, you're not going to be able to get through them. You're going to have snow drifted in it.
Correct. No, I don't say that anybody would be using those in the winter.
They're just not clean. They're not clear.
No.
I have
Excuse me, before we go any further, there's one thing that I have to tell you about this proposal. And this is, I'm going to be as candid as I possibly can about this. When we were first looking at this, there were some properties that were located on Meridian Street, which is about 350 or 400 feet away from the proposed trail. And at that time, I felt that because of the distance, that there was no need to notify these residents on Meridian. But after considering all the ramifications, the problems that may exist, I made a decision last week, and after Janet and I had talked, that it would be, I think it was behoove us to at least consult with these 10 people that are on Meridian to get their views on it. So that's in process right now. And I want to tell you that, not to delay this in any way, shape, or form, but just to let you know that there's 10 additional letters out there that we're asking for opinions as far as this trail is concerned. But I just wanted to let you know that, but I don't want it to in any way try to delay this discussion that we're going to have or the process. That was a decision I made. We all have 20/20 hindsight. I probably should have said, well, we should contact them originally, but I felt because the distance
Which I had
was so great,
suggested
it
in the
was,
beginning,
better.
but-
So that's what I did. But I just wanted to bring that out on the table, and that's why you see this thing marked up the way you have. The letters have been sent out. I expect responses back no later than April 8th. So with that, Margaret, excuse me for interrupting you, but go ahead with your comments.
I just have a problem of the way I see it coming up when people will ask who will maintain it after the trail has been in place. That is one concern, because if someone comes up here, like for instance you, Mrs. Papp, and request that and have gone through all this tremendous work, so what do we do later on? So who walks through it and who will help and ask for volunteers to help and maintain it? Because in a few years branches will fall over and all this stuff. So I'm sure the township will ask these questions, or some neighbors will ask these questions if it's someone walks through and polices that.
I think if to answer that question, I think if the open space volunteers are going to be used, and volunteers have graciously come forward to help put this trail through. It's going to be a very simple trail. It's not going to be a 20-foot wide trail that you see in a normal park. It's going to be about 2.5 feet wide.
That's what you proposed, 2.5 foot wide, with wood chips to just fill in the low spots.
The low spots.
I was of the understanding that there was a maintenance budget for the...
Yeah, I was going to answer that question. I said if we, after the trail is constructed and in process, if there's maintenance costs involved with maintaining the trail, the open space program maintenance fund would pay for that.
Well, one thing is so that I remember from being the chair for the nature area, so in the spring one has to go through and clear the trails from the debris and from leaves falling, because otherwise you don't know where the trail is. And I personally have gone through various wildflower trails and so, and raked this phrase so that the visitors had a nice way of knowing where they should go. And that should be on an annual basis. And that is something, I don't know whether we can hire someone for maintenance, or whether that is...
Is there maintenance?
We can handle that the same way as we do everything else with regards to maintenance. If a tree falls in, we'll call Tony Gray, and Tony Gray will contract with somebody to remove that tree. And if there's some additional fill-ins that have to be made, we can make arrangements to have that done also.
Well, when that is all settled, then that's fine.
And I would propose that the open space, this is just my way of thinking, would have a once-a-year maintenance review with Tony Gray, is that the person? To assess the trails. Well, actually, there's more than that, if this goes through, but there's more than one trail from what I understand, and that would be a good policy to have, is just review it once a year and see what needs to be done.
Yeah, that would be covered with the overseer program.
Yeah, because I think, if I can interrupt,
we have to
with
review.
Mr. Tony Gray, he wears many hats now, and we have, the township is very seaming down with personnel, and I mean, to put something more on his shoulders, that is something we should not request, I think.
Or if there's volunteers
Some
that
volunteers or so
do
that they
that,
say in March,
fine.
April or so, you walk through and give a report, that would be fine.
a report.
I
Right.
think that Margaret brings off a very good point. There are going to be some staff adjustments with the township shortly. I don't know exactly what those are going to be, but Tony has been our staff representative, and what he does is that he doesn't go out and survey the property.
Well, that's what I wasn't suggesting
In other
he
words,
physically do it.
he
I
will
mean,
get a
take
call,
a report from
say
someone.
there's a tree down, and then he will go out and take a look at it and depending on what it is, he might call one of us, or he might just have it done. And that's basically what he's been doing with all the ash trees that have been died and have been in danger of falling on people's property, or, you know.
I have a feeling that if this trail that I am proposing is not a huge, like it's one block through, you know, and it's, I have a feeling that people using it will definitely, if they see something there, they'll pick it up and throw it off the trail. You know, just like the bike path, you know, if there's a limb or something, people that are using it stop and throw it off. They don't call and stop and call Tony Gray to come and pick the limb up, that type of thing.
Well, I didn't want to personally attack you. It was just in a general idea, because I foresee more requests for trails, and that I think that issue needs to be...
yes, I do too.
You know,
yes.
Needs to be checked and cleared before we start that. It's not personally with the trail, because...
No, it's all of them. All of them need to have a review, and the consideration of maintenance should always be there before you start anything.
Pam?
Janet, when you did the original survey without adding Meridian, 19 favored the trail, 11 opposed, and 1 was neutral?
If you have that on your work, yes. I don't have it in front of me.
So there's more in favor of the trail than there are that are opposed?
Of the ones, yes.
And my personal experience with nature trails is we have one in our backyard through a woods that's owned by the church, and it's been a delight to be able to go through the woods to get to, it's accessible to Meridian Road and Macomb Street. And I personally think that a nature trail, if it's kept natural, and I read some of these comments that were opposed, and I guess teenage parties get back in there.
They're talking 10 years ago. Yeah, when there were a good number of teenage boys in the neighborhood at that time.
So it would be used mostly by people that live nearby, just for a walk in the woods?
Yes. I can't see that anybody would really know that it's there unless they pick up a trail map, or it's not going to be like neon lights saying this is a little trail here. The only people that I see would know, like in your little trail, would be people that live right there.
Well, our neighbors use it in another street, and every once in a while I see people going through the trail, and it's not offensive at all. I'd like to see it used.
I don't see the history. You know, past history is just that, past history. I know that there were, like I said, at one time a good number of boys that were teenagers all at the same time in the neighborhood, and right now the makeup of the neighborhood is mostly people that are in the retirement age or approaching that. We have a few younger families, but very few at the moment. You know, that may be transitioning as people sell, but I think if people grow with the kids knowing, you know, like the younger families moving in with a small trail there, where the children probably will be cutting across from one street to the other, or parents walking with them, going through, maybe having a play date with the child on the next street over, would be an asset. You know, and it would not be used, I don't see, unless somebody has the type of skis that you use on land. What are they called? The cross country type. I don't know if that would even be wide enough for that in the winter. But if children start using it, even in the winter, it may be kept accessible. You know, with enough people walking, or you know, as you know, cars trails or foot trails will become cleared if people walk on them. So, you never know. I mean, what the composition of the neighborhood is going to be in the next 10 years. But right now, I felt that, and I was in the neighborhood at that time, and I don't remember that many, you know. I mean, there may been a few around graduation time, but I live in an area right across from the park, and I was pretty much aware. And I've had to call the authorities a few times on some things that I thought they should check out and drive around in the neighborhood. I was also told that the safety thing of the trail by Cliff was that the police do monitor, you know, by checking it, you know, and see what's going on. So I think there's a closer eye when there is a trail in an area, rather than just kids. I think they'd rather not have an eye on them in any way, shape, or form than have an eye. So I think that a little trail will cause people to have more of an eye on that area and hopefully watch over it more, rather than just having it, debris.
Talking with Chief Bossarelli, he says that's one of the things that the policeman who has the motorcycle, the two-wheel vehicle, can...
Whether he can make it back there or not, I've walked it, and I don't know if I'm
in its
having...
present condition, probably
Yeah,
no.
no.
You'll have to use maybe a trail bike or something.
Yeah, or walk it, but it wouldn't take them long once the trail's back there, if they wanted to
If he goes
walk.
through there, how long does it take to walk it? When the trail's in there, probably...
I would say probably no more than 5 or 10. 5. It depends on how fast you want to walk and why you're walking through. If you're walking through leisurely and want to look at the birds and the trees and sit down on a stump a while, maybe you could be back there a half hour, but just to basically walk it. You're walking 1 block. How long does it take you to walk a block?
Me?
Well,
Not much.
I mean, maybe 5 minutes at the most.
Okay.
I would say if you're walking at just a regular pace, but it's not. You're talking 1 block of space. So a kid running, he might make it in 2 minutes. Through there.
Art, do you have any comments?
No, I don't have any comments.
Okay. Now, we have our 2 liaisons here who are technically not voting members, but I would appreciate to have their comments as residents. Lee?
Thanks, Cliff. I'm in favor of natural trails myself. My major concern with all of these is I used to walk in the woods, forget a trail or not. And then if right now with the leaves off, you can see all the branches that are down. So I don't do it anymore because I don't want a branch to hit me on the head or anybody else. So that's my only reservation. I respect the opinions of the people who are in favor of it and the people who are opposed to it. I understand both sides, but I just wanted to share with you that that's my concern. My second concern would be that I would like to make sure that whatever decision is made here is made with standards that would affect and have affected all previous trails that have been created. I don't want to have to, I want a standard to judge it by, as opposed to 19 people favor and 11 don't.
And what other, do we have that?
No. Basically, to answer your question, the way we've been addressing the trail issue is that if somebody wants a trail, we go through the process that you've gone through. Is our standard operating procedure.
So each trail would be individual, I guess, per the area.
But we check with the police, though that's a standard. If the police,
Yes.
if the police and the
Safety
fire department
standard.
says no,
Yeah. When I say
then
we
that's
don't have a
major
standard, in other words, we do have a, I think you have copies of it, what our trail procedure is.
Right.
Yeah, that's our standard. That's what we do. Another,
Right, and I appreciate that,
we consider people's opinions on the trail, but, and that's just one of the factors.
Right, and I understand that that's one of the things that has to be done. It goes through the process. It's just
Safety is one.
Number one for me is the safety.
Right, safety is one of the major things for me, too.
It goes without saying, but we do have a fund for that, and once it's built, it would work.
I think in our procedures, one of the things we do not want is we do not want hard trails, because they would
Correct.
damage the ecology of the area.
One of the most important things, addressing your safety issue, what was her name?
Yeah.
Lee. One of the first things that sort of got me going on this, it wasn't just my opinion. I'm a walker, and I walk around the area, and one of the residents, I had stopped, and they were doing some landscaping, and I asked them how they felt about, or what they would feel. That's how how would you think about a trail, going across from Voight to Paulina? And one of the gentlemen said, I'd love it, because he said, my grandkids come over and they always want to go out there, but I'm afraid to let them out there because, it's so wild and there's no real path and they might get lost and, he's an older gentleman, although he's still working, and he said, I'd love it, having something a little safer to walk on than just all the down trees and everything. So if there was a path, it would make it a bit safer. So safety was sort of the first thing that came to mind for putting a trail in. And if you're afraid of tripping, or if you have, issues with walking. I can't see somebody with a walker or a wheelchair or anybody trying to go down this trail. But I mean, if you have physical issues, I would think that those would be people that would be prudent enough not to make that trip down the trail. But the main issue here was to make it safer for people that did have the inclination to walk through there. And from what I understand, trees are going to be removed from the area where the trail is, and if there's any dangerous trees going to fall down, is that what I'm understanding, that those would be taken down, or volunteers can take those down?
As far as the tree removal, when we walked the trail, I think there was about 3 or 4 of us that walked it, there were some instances where trees had fallen down across where we would like to have the trail go.
There's trees on top of trees.
And those would have to be removed.
Yes.
Yeah, and those would be removed. If you have to cut them in half, cut them here and then cut them here, and remove that area and create a trail, that's what
If a volunteer or a neighborhood member wanted to cut down some of the dead trees back there to make it a safer area, like you said, something falling on your head, is that a possibility? Do they have to check? Do they have to sign up for that, or how would one? I had a gentleman that I said was willing to help, but I'll sign off on liability. I'll do whatever I would do. He'd really be anxious to help with it.
When it comes to the removal of trees,
the dead trees,
or removal of those trees, I think that we would prefer to have the assigned personnel that we have now with the township remove those trees. And that way we avoid the liability.
Okay, well, how do volunteers take part in the process then?
The volunteers would take part in the process by maybe putting down the mulch, maybe removing some of the small limbs or something like that. But when it comes to getting out there with a chainsaw to remove trees, that should, in my opinion, rightfully be done by qualified personnel, who are bonded and who would, are insured and who do that professionally.
Cliff, I have a friend who lives in Florida, and the way they handle this kind of problem with tree removal is they have the professionals there, but then there are people who are volunteers who are assisting those professionals. So perhaps we could look at that kind of arrangement too.
Like hauling out some of the, like if there are, well, as you know, you've been back there, a lot of dead trees, and all of them aren't going to be used. Well, I'm assuming that we would use the chips from the dead trees, a wood chipper. The township has a wood chipper to use.
We don't have a wood chipper.
We don't have a wood chipper.
I really think that when you're talking about removing trees, it has to be done by somebody who is licensed. It should not be an amateur. Because you've got the risk of somebody killing themselves, and I can cite you an example on this island that somebody got killed when he cut a tree down himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened since I've been here.
Well, what I'm speaking of mostly is there's a lot of them that have pretty much already fallen down.
I understand, but
trees.
even falling, even when you cut it down, if the log rolls and it rolls on top of you, you're going to get injured. So there should be a professional that knows what he's doing in order to do it safely. Because the last thing you want to do is have somebody get injured trying to do something that he doesn't know how to do.
Okay, let me understand what you're saying. The down trees, if they're already, can they be taken out of there? There's a lot of debris in down trees. Can some of that be removed?
Well, I would think that if the trail goes forth, that should happen before the trail is actually finalized.
And that would be done hired by someone in the township, possibly with volunteer.
The way I see this working, if, let's say for sake of argument, the trail is approved.
Yes.
Step one, you would go through and you would mark out the trail using either, you'd probably use some stakes or maybe some paint, to mark out the trail. And then the next step would be to remove any dead trees or any trees that are in danger of falling onto that trail, and have that removed, and have that work be done by, as Art rightfully said, a professional person. And we have people that do that for the township. All right. And then I think the third step would be to go through and maybe clear, after that's done, to clear the trail out and put in maybe some wood chips here and there to finish that off, maybe remove some limbs, clear some areas. That could be done by volunteers. But that's my opinion, but I think that's the way it would work, Janet.
Can I say something else? If you are asked by residents, there was one letter that we received, and these people live in your neighborhood and they are very worried about the access to the trails. They should be somehow limited to barriers or posts preventing access other than foot traffic or bicycles.
Yes, I know
and
which one.
we had done that with the Centennial Farm open space already, and so that not really vehicles can use it. That we would take care of, right? That is our procedure from the two.
So that where the entrance is, that there would be what, some kind of
entrance or
post
exit, or so that there would be posts or maybe some enormous rocks or whatever.
to preclude any motorized or wide vehicles being able to get on the trail.
Widened, and then, motorized little vehicles can go through. And
You know,
kids
the
can-
funny thing about that, though, Marguerite, is if there's the two posts there, I don't know how it works out at Centennial Farm, but somebody could probably just ride right around a post.
That
But
is Manchester and the one that was a wide path. And of course, the big ATVs with four-wheelers, they can't go through there.
they wouldn't probably want to, because it's sort of mucky and, I mean, it's very soft in the
Well,
woods.
you have,
Unless
you will
there's
find
a...
a way to get through.
That's what I mean. But, I mean, if somebody wants to actually go
But if
through, I don't think a
someone is
post
concerned
would...
about it, that will be addressed by the
Yeah.
police, right, Cliff?
As
Yes.
best as you can, as best as we
We have
can.
done
But
that, before. And so.
Okay, I think, is there any other?
Well, I'd like to comment.
Yes.
I'd like to go back to the purpose of open space, or the purposes of open space that are listed in the ordinance, specifically include hiking and observing nature. And speaking as a liaison, I believe it encourages families to be active and outdoors, and I
I
think
do
it
too.
benefits township residents who have paid for the open space over the years. So I strongly encourage the Open Space Committee to recommend approval to the Township Board. And I especially think if the police have no issues, then I don't believe the
No.
committee should have any as far as the safety.
I wanted to be clear with the safety issues, how the police assess this now. They go and they say, they look at the area and they say, I can police this easily? Is that what it basically is?
Yes.
That it's not a problem for
Yes.
police?
In other words, they look at they go out and physically look at the area and decide if there was a trail there.
When you say they, you mean
They
the
being the
safety
police
officer?
department, the police officers. I talked to Chief Polsarelli personally, and I have on these two issues and preceding issues. So go and take a look at it and give a decision as if a trail was there. Would it pose a safety hazard, and could it be
Policing.
would security be compromised, and could they police it? And if they come back and they say they have no problem with it, and that's what they did, I have to take them at the word that it would be surveyed, it would be policed.
And if they've been with the department long enough, they probably know of some of the past
They know of trails.
situations that...
They know of trails that none of us.
10 years ago.
Yeah, they know of trails that we don't know anything about.
Yes, they know much more than we, the general public, know
That's
about
correct.
what
That's correct.
possibly happened or happened
Okay.
in any one area.
All right.
Marguerite, Pam?
I think, we could, I think what we're faced with here, and let me give you my views on it. I would like, as I said before, I want to get the reviews of the people on Meridian, okay? But from what I see, before we go to the Township Board, we have to have all our ducks in a row before we go to the Township
I
Board.
wanted to make I did make this comment to you when we met the other day. There is one little street on Meridian where the house, and you saw it when you walked through the woods, Marguerite, you saw
Yeah,
it?
Scott Street or whatever?
Yes, there's
Yeah.
one little house on Scott Street.
Yeah.
Did you happen to send
Yes.
because he's much more, I mean, he's right, you can see the house and jutting into the woods. He actually was, like, you can see his house from the back of the other houses. You can look into his house, or you can look at the house. And now that there's no leaves there, you can see it much clearer. So you did send that household a letter?
I'm almost certain that I did, but I will double
check, because then we will have everything, every person that, as far as I know, unless there's an invisible house there somewhere, I don't know.
But as far as what we have thus far, I think my own personal opinion, and everybody's given their own personal opinion, is that I think a trail in this area would be an asset to that area. It's the people, and it's kind of like at the north end. And I think that before we go to the township, that
and we don't have anything there really.
That's right. That's right. And I would like to have the people on Meridian comment, but I think it would be an asset to that particular area. I know there are people who are opposed to it, because they're opposed because of the possibility of
mischief.
They'd lose the mischief, and they'd lose the peace and tranquility that they have. It's very important that you have the people who live adjacent to that area, and that's why we segregated it into the general people in that whole area, what they think, and then we isolate it to include only those people that are adjacent to that area.
One of them, what surprised me was on Voight, Ron Schneeman, who was the Citizen of the Year this past year. Him and his wife, Yachia, they're one of the first people that I talked with, and they're right on, they're adjacent to the property, and their whole backyard, their whole house is like windows in the back, and they were very supportive from the very beginning. He says, have him call me, and he sees everything. He says, I don't see anything, he walks back there. He says, I don't see anybody, and they're right on the property.
Yeah.
They don't see anything. And what these people were writing about was years and years and years ago. It's not like it's nothing.
However, on the downside, if it does become an issue, then, and I think, we said that the police would have the right to close the area.
It, yes.
Absolutely.
If it becomes, I wouldn't want it to be a haven for bad behavior.
To kind of wrap this thing up, I think we've talked about it. I think you have done a commendable job in soliciting the views of the residents. You have been subject to some very polite conversation and some not so polite conversation.
I'm sure.
And I know there are people who are vehemently opposed to it because it's a change. It's a change.
I think that I'm hoping that those people will maybe change their minds in the future if it happens. I'm not presuming that we'll get the go on it. I hope it will, but I think that it will be an asset to the area, and we do not have anything. And we're talking about the tranquility of the woods. All the people would have to do to keep their tranquility, which pushed me over, was when you walk back there, how quiet it is, how you hear the birds. All you hear is the nature. And even though it's just a small distance from the two roads, you get a totally different feeling when you're back there. You're in the woods.
All right. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just...
If it can be safely done, and I wanted all the residents to be contacted and just take a fair...
I totally agree, and that's why that area of Scott Street, I believe that area, that house is contacted.
What's the name of the street again? James Street or?
I'll double check that.
Okay.
If it's not, we'll send out a letter to them. If
Scout
it is,
Street or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll double check that, and then I think what we'll do is we'll just present our findings to the board and see. And
will we know, or will we be notified in some way when, or who can we contact about the agenda for that?
We will ask that this item be put on the agenda for the township board.
Yes.
When we find out at what township board meeting this item is going to be presented, it's published in the paper with the paper. But I think in this case, we should make a special effort to inform all parties concerned, so that they can be in attendance at that meeting.
Yes,
okay?
think
And we'll
so,
try to
also.
do that by the end of April if we possibly can.
or at least the ones that are interested in,
Absolutely.
have expressed an interest in being
So we
there.
can send it out on the, we can have Ted send the notice out on the Grosse camera, Grosse TV.
That'd be good.
So we're shooting for the April, but I'm very interested to see what kind of results we're going to get from these people in Meridian.
I really, now that's it's sort of a little unfair to them because when we first started this, you had suggested not because they were so far away, and I really haven't, mentioned it to them because of that. So
You're
I feel
exactly right.
a little
But as
bad
far
about that right
when you
now.
have something like this in a doubt, because time has passed, but I
You're
found out
saying, well,
that...
why didn't we get asked?
Yeah,
I would feel the
that's
same
exact-
way.
So it's easier to do it now,
Right, before the fact.
before the fact, than to wait and do it after the fact.
But that's going on record. I want to know.
Sure.
That I was told that was,
Okay.
it was
This is-
advised not to. That's why I did not contact them.
Okay, so we're going to we'll make sure that this is on the agenda
Okay.
for the Township Board meeting.
Thank you for your time.
Pam, any further comments?
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention in my comments, that the safety issue with little children being in the woods and maybe coyotes or some wild animal, and I'm thinking those parents that are concerned should be walking with their kids.
They shouldn't let
and
them
not
go.
send them out. Hopefully that they would not
Not let them go
on
by
their
themselves in the
own
woods.
if
I wouldn't
there's
let a child.
concern.
Okay.
And
That a
one of the
coyote-
residents said that she wanted to be sure to know when it was on the agenda. So
Yes.
when it's on the Township Board agenda, we want to make sure it's Marion Park Trail
Yes.
that's listed and not just trail.
Now, Pam, one of the things that I think you should double-check, we have already, in other words, this is from a technical point of view, and I use technical in a rather derogatory term, that it wasn't purchased with open space funding. It was donated by the Krause family
Yes.
as a deed-restricted piece of property to be maintained in its natural state as outlined in the open space program, so on and so forth. But we have given that, we've always considered that part of the open space. So I don't want, hopefully I won't have any, somebody say, well, technically it's not open space, so we have no business getting into it. Well, it is open space by fact. Okay?
That was not part of the properties that were transferred as part of the bridge settlement.
No, because it was deed restricted.
It was already.
But
Township owned.
it's considered open space because it's deed restricted. And that's a position I think we've taken all along.
Also, I think that it's opened up these little trails, the other one too,
Right.
have opened up the Open Space Committee to
Okay.
a lot of work and a lot of
Right.
criticism and but I think it's brought out a lot of opinions of the people on the island.
There's some
too.
people that are very, very vocal against it, and I'm
And I
sure
think that
there's a
the,
lot of people that'll be upset if it goes for, but
I think the opinions of everyone are valid, and I think that they all deserve to be heard, and it's not an issue that's going to go away. It's going to go forward, and I think a lot of the people that have paid taxes, like you said, that want to enjoy the open space, not deface it, not trash it,
sure.
deserve some little piece to enjoy it.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
Janet, thank you very much for your time and effort in this issue. Just to make it clear that we will present this to the Township Board. We will wait until we get the responses back from the people on Meridian, number 2. Number 3, I'll double-check to make absolutely certain that that individual on that little cul-de-sac street has been informed. And when this item is on the agenda, all the dots will be dotted and all the T's will be crossed, and we'll go forward with it. Okay, thank you. All right, why don't we we have one more trail request, and that is for Stout Street. I think if you look at your package that I presented to you, it's in basically the same format. It's a much simpler request. We have, just for sake of description. We have a request by a lady who lives on Stout Street to put a trail from Stout Street to the end of Park Lane, where Park Lane ends, and I believe it's just south of Burning Bush, and then from there it's very close to Meridian. There are 4 homes that would be affected by this, 2 on Stout, 2 on, call it Park Lane, where it dead ends. It'll be a small trail, 2.5 feet wide. We had a Mrs. Kung who spearheaded this, and the basic reason for her spearheading this was so that the children could walk from Stout Street to school instead of going around the back streets. So there were 4 people that were contacted. 2 were in favor, 2 were opposed. There was a lot of there were some concerns that were raised, and so I would like to then start off with. Let me put Woody on the spot. I started with Margaret before. Woody, I want to give your comments as far as this trail request is concerned. I think you know which one I'm talking about.
Why is it only 2.5 feet wide? That's what I don't understand.
Well, it's only
I
wide
suggest
enough.
that's a detail that we probably don't need to get into. It's more the issue of, do we want to trail at all in that location, and we can work out how.
Doesn't make any difference to me. It made a
Okay.
difference to those people.
So,
They're the ones that have to put up with it.
All right. Woody, any other comments?
No other comment.
Okay. All right. Let me switch. Leah?
No, just the same comments that I made about the one for Marion. It's the safety issue, and this one perhaps bothers me a little bit more, but Pam took care of that with her comment that parents should be monitoring the kids and not letting them walk through an area by themselves.
I'd like to respond to the characterization of it being only about one child. I walked through it last night, and over the years, I don't live too terribly far from there, and my family and I have used it when there was more of a trail before the trees fell. And, you know, it's a little more of a challenge now because you are hopping fallen trees, but it's still a nice little stretch. And so I really think it opens up the 2 neighborhoods to one another, that folks on Stout, and even because it's a ways to the east down Stout, even parts of East River would find that they can walk to both Park Lane School and the playground behind it, and Sacred Heart and the ball fields that are there. I really see it as opening up the neighborhood, and having walked in there, you know, while the leaves are down, yes, it's visible for a ways. When it's greened up, when it's more commonly going to be used, I don't think the line of sight is going to be there for the neighbors. So this is another one that, again, with the purposes of the open space having been identified to include this kind of thing, I encourage it.
Okay. Margaret?
Yes, glad to turn on here. I would encourage trails as well if they're good thought of, and residents desire that. I personally do not feel like we should say to people, go over to Metro Park for a run and for a walk, because this is one thing that we advertise in our brochures, so that we have open space and people think about it, that they can have use of it. Not everything, the voter said, not everything should be opened up, but if there is a request for something that parents would like to have their kids and themselves going through, we should do all we can to enhance that. So it's nice and very polite of us to ask the neighbors of their opinion. Some had already stated that they purchased this property because of open space and no one else was taking over, and they are used of not having any curtains in their properties. But I think it should go to the residents of the island. If there should be a problem later on, we can close it and say people have abused it or children have abused it, but this is teaching our residents some responsibilities for our neighborhoods. Our personal liability ends at our property line, and open space is an enhancement to all the properties surrounding open space. And if there is one small intersection that some people would like to see it, let them have it. With the wildlife, you have this all over. You have the coyotes on the street, you have the deer on the street, and with the cars, and let's see how it works out. So I'm also in favor of something like that.
Pam?
Having enjoyed a nature trail in my backyard, I certainly like the idea of having access to the open space in a preserved way. So it's not going to be high traffic, but it can be enjoyed by those that are wanting to get someplace by cutting through the woods. And I have no objection. It looks like there are 2 for and 2 against, and hopefully the 2 against will decide that it's not going to invade their privacy that much. It's just giving access to our open space that can be enjoyed a little bit more than just driving by and seeing a woodsy area.
My comment is that this request was originally given to provide a shortcut for a person's child to cut through to get to school without having to go around and stay on the sidewalks. And I mentioned before that going through the woods in the wintertime in Michigan, from about the first part of November until about the end of March, you can't get through them anyway. So thinking that that's going to be a shortcut for that period of time, which is most of the school year, you're not going to be able to cut through there anyway. So my point is that I think that part of the argument is gone. As far as the idea of having a trail through the open space properties for summer enjoyment, that's again in the category of is that what we want to do with the open space properties? But as far as the shortcut through to school, I don't think that's practical, because we have enough trouble keeping the kids out of the dangers that they encounter by just going down the sidewalks when we ask them to walk to school today. We're having trouble with that problem, let alone going through the woods.
Anything else, Art?
That's it.
Okay. Well, my comments are, I have more of a safety concern about this trail than I do the one on Marion, because of the fact that if the kids use it, there's always a danger of something happening to one of the children. And maybe my concern is a little bit overbearing, but I do have some concerns about this particular trail being it could be used as a shortcut, there's no doubt about it, but at what risk to the children? Now, that's my personal feeling on the thing. I don't know what type of dangers lie in the area. I don't know if there's any coyotes back there, or there's deer, or whatever. But I am concerned about the safety aspect of this particular trail. Not because I'm opposed to the trail. I'm just opposed to the people that are going to be, the kids that are going to be using it. But I have to be as candid as I possibly can about this particular trail.
Cliff, just to support what you're saying, and that is what I would say, is that I would question my rationale if I were to turn a young child through an open space trail that goes through an area where I can't see them on their way to school, or somebody else can't see them on their way to school. So it's not really a good thought-out process of turning a child loose through the woods and say you're on your way to school. As a matter of fact, we hear all the time that they say you shouldn't even have one child going down the street by himself. There should be at least two. So if there's something happens, that one of them can run for help.
Well, I'd like to respond to both of you. Granted, my kids are 16 and 23 now, so they're not small children. But I think these calls are those for individual families to make in terms of how they manage risk for their own families. And there was nothing said that this mother was going to let her 5-year-old trounce through the woods to Park Lane unaccompanied. I think families need to make the individual determination of, is it okay if it's a group of kids? You know, I'll walk with my child to school every morning because she's only 5 or 6, those kinds of things. The other observation I'd make is those woods are there now, and, you know, kids are back and forth through those woods. Really, what we're talking about with this trail is it makes it safer for them because it increases foot traffic through the neighborhood, so there would be, you know, a likelier use, and it removes the hazards of hopping over the fallen trees that I mentioned. So I'd like to say that, you know, while I respect your concern for safety, and it's a kind thing to observe that, you know, you're very hopeful that we keep kids on the island as safe as we can, that's also an individual call for each family. And we had a family come here and say, you know, I'd like this, and I think implicit in that is, you know, and that mother was taking responsibility for her own child's safety.
All right. I think basically what we should do in this case is just summarize our concerns. I'll summarize them on the sheet here, and we'll forward this to the Township Board for their review and their ultimate approval.
You can roll comments, Chris?
Yeah. I think what I'd like to do, maybe talk about meeting times, but if this is going to interfere with your time, well, maybe we can stop right here and yes. Go ahead and let's make some, okay, we talked about this for a long time, so let's go ahead and let's get your comments about it.
If we're going to do this, why don't we amend the meeting agenda so we take public participation now, and that way, after you've taken public participation...
Make a move that the meeting agenda be so adjusted. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Go ahead.
Tom Alberto, 8049 Berkshire. I've been taking some notes during the presentation, so they're not organized very well. But when you start talking, and I've had this conversation with you personally, Cliff, when you start talking about these projects, putting a trail through open space property, there's a lot of emotional issue about it, but then there's the reality of what it takes to put a trail in place. As Mrs. Selby was so kind to let us, tell us, these properties were paid for by taxpayer dollars. It wasn't 38 homes, a portion of 38 homes. It wasn't 4 homes, which account for a fraction of a percent of the residences on Grosse Seal. These properties were bought and paid for by 100% of the population. Now, when you start doing a project like this, you're going to put a trail in. You need to have some guidelines. And when people come up and make the request to put a trail in, they should have done some due diligence. They should have had some guidelines to work by, and then they should put their facts on the table before they ask you to spend money to put in a trail. First of all, there's going to be engineering costs. And when I say engineering costs, you made the statement that you have to put some posts in the ground, some paint in the ground, some tape on the trees. You've got to lay it out. How far away from an adjoining homeowner's property do you think is proper to lay out a trail? So that has to be engineered, has to be laid out, has to be marked. When you talk about volunteers, and you made these statements, if they're not covered by workman's comp and they injure themselves, yes, there is liability there. That's why you hire people. Now you're taking my tax dollar, my being a resident, and you're going to put in, spend money to hire people to cut down trees. These trees, large trees, are not handled by hand. It takes a piece of large equipment to do this. This is my money. I'm part of that 2,500 residences on Grosse Ile whose tax dollars pay for that. This is not the private park of 9 or 18 or 4 or 38 homes. This is open to me. Now, do you want me to park? You're going to deny me access to this? Or do you want me to park in your front yard? That means there needs to be some parking to make this available to the residents of Grosse Ile. How large is that parking area going to be? Is it going to accommodate 4 cars, 6 cars, 8 cars? Will it be posts put in the ground to designate it? Is it going to be wood chips or is it going to be paved so the cars don't get stuck? These are things you've got to think about. This is not just, geez, a great idea, let's put in a trail. There's other things that need to be recognized here. Trash containers. You put trash containers on it, who's going to maintain it? What's the cost of the trash container? What's the cost of that bench that you're going to want down there so people can sit and enjoy the wildlife? There's a cost associated to that. The Centennial Farm has open space and has a trail. That was brought up. But Centennial Farm also has parking. It's not me parking in front of somebody's house to access that trail. There's parking available for me at the farm. And that's why I asked, are you going to have parking areas for these? And it's not just this one trail down by Marion or the cut-through on between Stout and Park Lane. This is for every piece of open space that somebody's going to come to you and emotionally make a plea to put a walking trail in. You need guidelines. They should do that. What is the lineal foot? What's it going to cost per lineal foot to lay that down? And that's how long is it going to take a landscaper with the proper tree cutting equipment and heavy equipment to move those big logs. Before people come to you, they should have some idea what it's going to cost. This is, if they're looking at it as their own private property, their own private park, they need to do more homework. I'm concerned about safety of kids only because where I live down there by where that trail between Stout and Park Lane comes through, I see coyotes in there all the time. My wife's been chased by a coyote down there. I have a concern, same as you do. Yes, one thing to say that parents should oversee their children, but the reality is there's kids going to be running through there. Supervised or unsupervised. That I don't see that as coming into play. It's a good point, but I don't see that as not every parent supervises their children as well as maybe we think they should. It doesn't happen. But then you got approximate yearly maintenance costs. You have to build in. You just talked about a budget, how much you need to put in there for tree removal. And in trails, it's just going to bring even more to light how much more annually you're going to have to budget for tree removal. Because as soon as that tree falls across it, somebody's going to call you up and say, I need this removed. And it's going to be a cost. So it's not just 38 homes or 4 homes. It's 2,500 homes on Grosse Ile that should have input into what you're being asked to do. And those guidelines should be in place. They should do their homework and then make their plea to you as the Open Space Commission. So when you go to the board, you can say, it's going to cost us approximately X amount of dollars to institute this trail, and it's going to cost us approximately this many dollars a year to maintain it. It's just simple, logical truth. Take all the emotion out of it, all the BS out of it, and look at it from a dollar and cents standpoint. Now, how many people is that going to benefit? You can't make this a private park and then tell me I can't park on the street because it's inconvenient for you. There has to be parking, has to be all the stuff that I mentioned. And 2.5 feet, that's 30 inches. My God, that's the width of this dais up here. That's nothing. For 2 people to walk side by side down there, you need at least 4 feet, if not 6 feet. So I would strongly urge you to think about what you're doing before you make decisions based on putting trails in open space property. Think about what you're saying, think about what you're doing, and when these people come before you, they should have some idea. Is it going to cost $5 a foot? How many feet do I need to run? This should be done before they approach you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any other public comments? Yes.
Jim Budney. I live on Burning Bush. In fact, I live on the corner of Park Lane and Burning Bush.
Okay.
2 houses down from what you're talking about. I found it interesting that in listening to your discussion about the Marion Park, that you've evidently contacted all kinds of people, but for this one, you only contacted 4. And our enjoyment of our neighborhood is going to be impacted because of this shortcut. It's not going to be a trail, it's going to be a shortcut between Stout and Park Lane. That's, I don't think, what the purpose of open space is. If you wanted to have a trail in that area, it would be running east and west, not north and south. Because north and south, I mean, I can see the houses over on Stout standing on Park Lane by my park. So we're not, all this is going to be is a shortcut for the kids to come through. I mean, I'm not saying that no adult would ever walk through it, but they're not going to walk through it for a nature trail. There isn't enough, it's maybe 400 feet. Number one, I certainly would ask that you try and get input from the other residents that will be impacted with this.
I just want to make sure I understand. You're talking about further north on...
Well, if you were going the opposite way of what they're talking about doing it, the way it's going, north and south, it would be a north-south trail.
Yes.
From Stout from Stout Park Lane over...
You're talking about...
If it went the other way, where you're going through more property, you could call it a trail. This is merely going to be a quick shortcut to get from Stout over to our area. And we had enough with the sidewalks. We don't need any more traffic in our area.
Okay, and your address again? I'm sorry.
It's 8018. I'm right on the corner of Burning Bush and Park Lane.
Okay. Okay, very good. Okay.
All right? Thank you
very much.
And just to back up what Tom said, there's both coyotes, deer, all kinds of wild animals in that area. They travel on Park Lane all the time and down into that area.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there's any more comments about this...
No, this is public participation.
This
We changed the
specific
agenda.
area, okay.
We changed the agenda,
Good,
this
so
is public
just a
participation.
minute. Okay, thank you. Go ahead. No, come on up. Come on up.
Ernie Horvath, Hickory Island. I'd like to thank you for the questions that you answered last time. You brought up a lot more questions on my own, but I thank you for the time for letting me ask those questions, because a lot of people were interested in those answers. And then that led to your study session, which the same people started to watch on cable television, and after about 25 minutes it was stopped, right in the middle. Now, that wasn't posted on your calendar of events. That wasn't posted on the door down here. And it could have been in that small box when you turn right as you come into the Township Hall. But unless you go into the hall and with a flashlight look on the posted notes, you won't find it. So the next time you do that, and people don't have time to come down, even though you may have been notified wherever it was publicly. The whole idea of this new technology is to stay home sometimes if you can't make it and watch these study sessions or meetings. But once you've committed to a telecast, I think you should continue it. That's my only opinion. Otherwise, you were helpful answering my questions. But don't do that again, because you get hooked watching it, and then it's shut off, and then I'm not going to come down here until you have a PhD in whatever subject and get out of a sick bed. I'm not coming down at all.
Okay.
I don't have time. So could you look into that the next time?
Yes, thank you.
And are there minutes of that study session available?
No. I don't believe there are, no.
Will they be available?
I don't know.
Yes, we can compile minutes.
Yeah, we will compile minutes.
Because the comment was made, if they don't like it, they can come down, and then they can read the minutes. So I'm asking for a copy of those minutes and when they'll be
There
available.
will be minutes of the study session when it's completed.
Mark?
We're going to have we will have another study session.
Now you're going to have another study, and where will that, and when will that, and where will that be posted?
It'll be on April 7th.
Where will that be posted?
That'll be posted on the, outside the administrative office, and it'll also be posted on the, it could be posted on the Go Seal TV.
All right.
All right?
I'll look for it. Thank you.
But it probably will not be, televised. Okay? Yes, sir.
Hi, Craig Pilkington, South Point. And Mr. Clark, you look dangerous in those shades. I've got to tell you, everybody should get
sorry,
those.
I didn't get
Craig
it.
Pilkington of South Point. Just really questions. And then one suggestion relative to the topic you just discussed. As far as trails, just in general, I don't know whether you've ever considered it, but you may want to engage and actually do somebody walking down the trails and pointing out things to be concerned with, pointing out things that are of concern, also making a point to keep the trails clean. Something that can be done, maybe just 3 or 4 minutes, that can be put on Grow Seal TV, maybe even on the website. It's probably not going to satisfy a duty to warn. Nothing's going to keep somebody, I suppose. But so that people will use the trails and be aware of some of the things that you've talked about today that could put our folks at risk. And that venue and vehicle is certainly available for this commission to use to your advantage if you think it would be of value. Secondly, when was the last time that a quantitative survey of the island was done relative to open space to determine, to gauge perspectives on what is of value to island residents? Has it ever been done since the inception of the program? And again, not qualitative, quantitative.
As far as the number of acres of open space?
Just all aspects of open space, to try to determine whether the broadest portion of the population responding, what is of value in the open space program. Has it ever been
Yes, we made a survey back 8 years ago. We sent out 3,000, what was it? I think it was 3,000. If you look at your records, we sent out a questionnaire back in 2003. Talking and asked the residents in form of a questionnaire of the open space program what they think of it, particularly as it relates to trails. And that was in 2003.
Well, I'd suggest that it may be time, after 8 years, to revisit that and do it again. Is the committee confident that perspectives of all age demographics especially are being considered in your decision-making and your prioritizations? In the sense that, to try to be gentle, and I'm 55, and I think Mr. Malvesto, we had talked before, and we'd probably be sitting at the kiddies' table. But you've got a 35 to 50 age demographic, or 30 to 50 age demographic, whose perspectives on what's important in open space and the uses of open space may be vastly different. Is there any way to ensure and to engage that portion of our population to ensure that their viewpoints are being considered?
The only way to do that is by way of another survey in which you break out the answers based on your age. But we appreciate your comments on that.
Thank you. When you determine and you look at acquiring a property, is cost-benefit analysis to surrounding properties a consideration? Is that taken into consideration, what the impact on value and maybe an expected offsetting return to surrounding properties is going to be?
As far as that question, I think that can be best handled by the township board. And I'm not trying to evade your question, but the township the township manager and enter into these negotiations. They look at all aspects of the property, and it's ultimately approved by the township board.
Okay.
So I think that should be more properly addressed to them.
Okay. Is there a method of gauging what the overall economic benefit to the community of property that has already been acquired has been, to substantiate the value of those acquisitions? Has that ever been considered, or have you ever looked into that to try to make a case on behalf of those acquisitions?
No.
Is there consistently a discussion of other townships, what they're doing, their programs, as they come out, identification of best practices that might be incorporated into ours, and then benchmarking against other communities, and how they run their programs, what they've incorporated since the inception of ours that may be of value to implement?
So we have, as part of our goals and objectives, is to do some benchmarking. But in the reverse of that, many townships have called us to benchmark us with their programs.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is, now that we've had, I think we've had public comment, I'd like to get to the next item on the agenda, which is the meeting times. Now, this is one of the items that was brought up in the forum. I believe there are two issues here, one of which meets the requirements of the public, and one which meets some of the requirements of some of the attendees. There is a suggestion that we change our meeting times from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And I guess the only way to handle that situation is to ask for a vote. Some of them have left already. So I'd like to start. Margaret, you're going to be leaving. This is your last meeting.
My last meeting due to this question.
Right. So whether you answer this question or not...
3 years are over, so I don't wish to, and I cannot comment.
No, I don't expect you to. All right? Art has another engagement, so he has left. Pam? What do you...
Well, yeah, I'd like to accommodate those that want to attend but are held back because of working during the afternoon hours. So I would be willing to go with an evening meeting, just so long as it's not Thursday evening or Monday evening or Friday night.
It's hard to accommodate everybody, right? Except Monday and Thursday. Okay. Now Art has left.
Well, his
Did he give a comment? Did he?
He's very active.
His comments to you.
Well, he's very active with Kiwanis Club, and they meet at 6:30 on Thursday night, every Thursday.
6:30 Thursday. Okay. I know that you're not officially part of the committee, but I'd like to get your comments, Pat, because you're the liaison, technically.
Most concerned with, I know other two committee members who aren't able to be here tonight, here to have some conflicts, and then I'd like you to get their input before you make a final decision.
Okay. Woody?
It don't matter.
Woody? Okay. No problem. Myself, I have no problem with either time. So I guess the key here is we get in touch with Rose Ellison, I think is the other, Joe Sorty, and Art. So what I'd like to do is I would like to, in as much as you folks are here, what is your feeling on meeting times? So I'll start off with,
I personally prefer if you had an evening meeting, because I really am taking interest what's going on, and this could become even more difficult for me to make it 4 o'clock.
Okay. Ernie?
I'd also like 7 o'clock.
You'd also, and a gentleman in the back?
Jim, yeah, I would favor the 7 o'clock or later than 4 o'clock.
Later than 4 o'clock.
Same, because it favors that inclusion and engagement of that age demographic that I think is protected maybe as time, that 30 to 50.
Okay. Okay, I think we'll take this into consideration. We'll contact the other 2 members, and then what we'll do is we will take your comments into consideration as well. If you folks were not interested in having 7 o'clock meetings, I'm sure it wouldn't have been brought up in forum. So I think our task is to make a decision between now, before we have the next meeting, as to what time it's going to be and what day it's going to be. What I'd like to do is have it, it appears that the favor is to have an evening meeting, and I think but I want to hear from our other 2 members. And also, then I think we have to select a day of the week that we can have our monthly meeting where everybody can make it. And that's what we'll do.
Okay. The 3rd Monday would work for me, if Monday is good for anybody else, and any Wednesday other than the first Wednesday. So once you poll the other 2.
Just write it down and give it to me, Pam.
Okay.
Because I can't remember all of this. All right, so what we will do is we are going to change the times of the meeting. I think that's the way we're leaning towards. I believe I want to get the comments of the members who are not here tonight, and then we'll have to decide on a day. And the day that'll be decided is the day that fits into the member's schedule. Okay. It's getting towards 6 o'clock. As far as the overseer's assignments of new properties, I would like to entertain that we move this item to the next month's agenda, so that we can each think about it. By that time, we'll have a better delineation of what these open space properties are going to look like. It looks, just from an opinion standpoint, that this might dictate a need for additional members. I don't know. That's something that we have to discuss. So it's going to be quite a lengthy discussion. So I move that we do move this item on the agenda to the next meeting. There is, before we do that, there is one item that I would like to get the board's opinion on right from the get-go. One of the properties that we're now going to be stewarding is the bird sanctuary. The ladies of the garden club have been stewarding that land since, I would say, before the end of World War II. Well over 60 years. I think it would be, in my opinion, a travesty to assign somebody else as overseers of that property. So I would like to propose to the group tonight that we continue to invite the ladies of the garden club to oversee and be stewards, to continue to be stewards of the bird sanctuary, and also add in as much as it is part of the open space program now, that their maintenance needs, that we help them up with their maintenance costs, and use the maintenance fund to take care of some of the things that should be for that piece of property. And with that in mind, I'd like to get some comments from Woody. Any problem with that proposal?
What do you consider
consider open space to do for that?
Well, in as much as it's open space, technically, then they would be eligible to receive open space maintenance funds for items that they need to maintain their property. But more importantly...
They only have a corner.
Pardon?
They only have a corner.
Yeah, but they've been taking care of that whole area. They've been taking care of the trail as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know that they always set aside some money for clearing and chipping that trail and taking care of any fallen trees, and I'm sure they would be very grateful for funding. When they had more regular home tours, that money from the home tours paid for some of their projects, like maintaining the flower bed there at Four Corners and maintaining the wildlife sanctuary. So I would think that they would be very happy to have a contribution towards the stewarding, but it's been a tradition that the Garden Club maintains, because it fell into the Garden Club. The former president of Michigan Garden Clubs was an island resident, Marie Smith, and her husband worked in Lansing and found out about this property coming up as a tax sale, and it was purchased for a very reasonable price and turned over to the Garden Club. So traditionally, they have been keeping that open and the trail available for walkers, and I know they don't want to relinquish that.
Margaret, as your last act...
One more comment, please. If the ladies, the Garden Club, decides to be the overseers and still work for it, it's very gracious, and I must commend them for that. My only concern is that we have a limited amount for them, otherwise they make it a priority now, since they don't have any funding problems, that it will not become a A1 property, and it comes out of our maintenance fund. So we have to have some limits on the expenses. I think maybe that should be taken into consideration when we talk with them about it.
That's a very valid point. I appreciate your comments. Okay. With that, I'd like to make a motion. Before we make a motion to adjourn, I would like to publicly thank Margaret for her service. Margaret may embarrass you a little bit by lauding you for all the hard work that you did in the committee and all the work that you've done in the field, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, I make a motion. Yeah.
Just real quick, I'd like to offer my assistance if you need help in going over these properties. If you're short-handed.
Okay.
I don't wish to be a member of the Open Space Committee, although I'm on the GPS, and I would volunteer my services either part-time or if it turns into a full-time.
Okay.
It's just an offer.
Okay.
Only volunteers, we can only do so much.
Appreciate your offering. So if that, I make a motion we adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.